whole other story. I want to talk to you about Afghanistan, if I can.
Sure.
All right, my friend. So this important speech that Obama gave. Now I lost my train of thought, but so he put in 4,000 troops. What bothers me the most is after all we've done for everyone on this planet, you know, like you were talking about how, like, let's say there was a problem with NATO or who's going to be threatened next. Who do you think is going to be there to bail them out? After all our money problems right now, this bailout, we're going.
No, but see, man, this isn't about that. These are the guys that killed 3,000 Americans before our very eyes. I mean, this is about going over there and dismembering an entity that murdered Americans, attacked our country.
When George Bush was president, it was never about that. It was about that.
It was about going over to the Middle East and inserting into the Middle East an American military presence to show that the paradigm had shifted. All bets were off. There was a calling in of accounts, and if the entire Middle East of rabid Islamic fundamentalists was suspect and was now in the crosshairs.
All right. Okay.
And we were in Afghanistan. We went to Afghanistan to deal with Taliban, and then we dealt with Saddam Hussein. And as far as whether there were WMDs or not, we found out soon enough. I got to move on. Thank you very much, JG. I got to move on to Freedom Tower, man, because that's what I said I was going to do. I mean, we could talk about going to Afghanistan for hours if you'd like. If ever there was a war that should not have any controversy attached to it, it's that one. But as the years have unfolded, as the years have drifted by, like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. Many of you are too young to remember that show, and that's the only thing about it that I do remember. But, you know, we just move on. Some things should continue to outrage us and should stick with us forever. Like, for instance, the World Trade Center, where today the announcement was made, well, we ain't going to call it the Freedom Tower. We're going to call it World Trade Center. We're going to call it One World Trade Center. The owners of the skyscraper, which is, to wit, the Port Authority of New York, they ran into controversy Friday with the decision to strip the building of its patriotic unofficial name, Freedom Tower. No more freedom, said the Daily News. The New York Post echoed the sentiment. The Port Authority announced that the planned 1,700 and then some foot building, 1,700 feet high, now barely above its foundations, will instead be known by the same name as one of the Twin Towers destroyed on the 11th of September, One World Trade Center. You know what they ought to call it? Building 7. Then we can say, see, never did fall down. Port Authority Chairman Anthony Cosilla made the announcement Thursday saying a bunch of stuff. As a matter of fact, we have him. Instead of me quoting him, why don't we just listen to what it is that this guy is saying about the Freedom Tower and the name change to One World Trade Center.
As we market the building, we will, ensure that, the building is presented in the best possible way. One World Trade Center is its address. It's the address that we're using. It's the one that's easiest for people to identify with. And frankly, we've gotten a very, interested and warm reception.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't gotten a warm reception at all, Mr. Cosilla. You're lying. You know you're lying. You're reading into whatever email trickled in. You didn't get a warm reception. People knew it as the Freedom Tower. And your problem is a political problem that you've attempted to solve by taking the name Freedom Tower away from it because it sounds too militaristic to some. It sounds too aggressive to some. I know exactly what happened. You got complaints about the Freedom Tower tag, so you're calling it One World Trade Center. So you're going to take the name of one of the towers that fell, which frankly should be retired, to put it mildly, and you're going to use that because, frankly, that's the address. You have got about as much sensitivity as that slob that kept his daughter locked in a dungeon. Although I do not attribute to you the same psychopathy, as they say, as that man suffered from or made others suffer from. You're talking like the typical modern millennium executive who wants to make as much money as he possibly can over the short haul with a project that's going to come in a sea of red ink anyway. And how can you get the dollars rolling in? And how can you make sure you don't piss off this group or upset that group? You got the Chinese as tenants in 2014. You want to make sure everything is nice and smooth and painted green. So let's just get rid of the Freedom Tower name, because after all, this is America, a place that does not have an identity. This is not a country that's allowed to wave a flag. This is not a country that's allowed to get angry. This isn't a country that is allowed to be upset or proud or irritated or is allowed to cry for any great length of time. We're the country that's got to stay strong and stay neutral and stay vanilla while all the other countries of the world get to look and act like jackasses. So don't, you can fool some of the people all of the time and all of the people partially and part of the people partially, and you know how that goes. Abraham Lincoln. Exactly. But you can't fool the kid here. What's wrong with Freedom Tower? I'll tell you what's wrong with Freedom Tower. I don't have to play all the audio. Freedom Tower is too controversial. Oh, yeah. And if you even say the word Freedom Tower, if you endorse that, you're a right-winger. Are you ready for that? You want to know why I became a 9/11 Democrat? I'm going to tell you just a quick story. My Democratic friends listening, my liberal, progressive friends, you want to know why I became a 9/11 Democrat? It wasn't the attack on the World Trade Center. I remember I was on the air that night. The night of the morning attack, I was on the air, we were talking, people were angry, and I remember saying, now let's be chill about this. I know there's a lot of people who want to take it out on Muslims. That's not fair. People called up and said Palestinians were dancing in the street. I questioned the veracity of that. I thought, are you sure? It sounds to me like there's a lot of really angry reactionary Americans. Let's be cool, And I was ready to get some payback, but I wasn't necessarily thinking in a national sense. I was thinking the family of man, No, you want to know what pissed me off and finally pushed me over the edge? It was just a few days later. There wasn't an Iraq war going on. There wasn't an Afghanistan war going on. It was just a few days later that firefighters decided that they would put an American flag on their fire truck and roll down the street to the different calls they had with a flag, and people got upset about that. Up in Berkeley, down in Hollywood, Florida. They didn't like seeing it. That's what finally pushed me right over the edge. I thought, Mike, I live in a country, and the last time I checked, we got a flag, and these guys are not allowed to fly it? They're not allowed to fly it. That's what I finally said. When did it happen that we're supposed to be embarrassed about who we are, and scuff our Buster Browns in the dust while everybody else gets to act like an animal? Everybody else gets to be stupid. Everyone else gets to be more racist than this country's been in the last 100 years. More totalitarian, more bigoted, more sexist than this country is, that reasonable people would say this country's been in many decades. But America will always lead the way in that stuff because, well, what the hell? I mean, you got to take it out on somebody. Why not take it out on the guy that's actually living large? So they don't want to call it the Freedom Tower. I don't even need to play the rest of this cheap propagandizing by this punk face, Chairman Anthony Cosilla of the Port Authority of New York. You don't want to call it the Freedom Tower because it offends people. How about that? All right, we're going to come back here in just a minute, take some more phone calls, and we got a couple of news stories to get to, including our Loon Alert. Tonight's Loon Alert, it's loony. 877-876-PHIL. It's Crime Night coming up. It's Simon Botts on the Leo.